As we get ready to transition seasons, Major League Baseball also prepares to transition from the regular season to the postseason. Now, of course, the Pittsburgh Pirates will not be making the transition to the postseason, but they still have a regular season to close. This is the Pirates edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live as the Pirates continue to close out the 2020 regular season tonight with a 1-0 loss to the Cincinnati Reds. I'm your host here, Mike Asti, and I'm going to be joined alongside my co-host for this broadcast, Matt Gajtka, as we're going to be following around this game, a little bit of this game, and then probably a lot more of what's going to be happening throughout the rest of the Major League Baseball season and into the postseason, and maybe even the Cincinnati Reds' actual viability as a postseason team, and kind of some other news and notes involved with that postseason. So again, the Pirates 1-0 losers. They now fall to, I believe, 14-34. Is that correct? Yeah, 14-34. Oh, the Reds now one game under 25-26. So Cincinnati still fighting in there while the Pirates fight ended a while ago. Matt, how you doing, man? I'm happy to be aboard back with you here, back in the saddle. That was one of those Pirate games that we kind of were reminiscent of earlier in the season where the bats didn't show up. The pitcher, Brubaker did get through 5 1/4, so they got a little bit of pitching, but no offense to support. Oddly enough, Bell got one of those hits. Brian Hayes kind of performed again to flash something for fans to watch. And I did pose the question if that is all you're watching for right now, if you're a Pirates fan. I don't know what else maybe you'd be watching for. But any thoughts on this game before we head into the postseason and kind of some news with the bubble format and the Reds who are still hanging on to being a contender?
Well, for one, it's pretty rare to lose 1-0 in Cincinnati at this ballpark, or even the former ballpark, Riverfront/Synergy Field. As they said on the broadcast, Greg Brown brought it up that it's the first 1-0 loss in the Queen City of Ohio since 1987. So
wow,
that
okay.
in and of itself is something, because how many games do they play against the Reds every year? It's 17 or 18.
Yeah.
with half of those in Cincy. So
And the
there's
Reds
that. There's
weren't
also the fact they've
always
now
built
lost
like
8 in
that,
a row,
though.
which is a season long. It wasn't long ago we were saying, hey, they're making it respectable. They had won 4 out of 6, in fact, as of about a week ago, and now they've lost straight consecutively for a week. They get swept by the Royals, but they've lost to the AL Central all year long. But now a 4-game sweep at the hands of the Reds. The Reds, who are surging, by the way, as you brought up, they're viable for the postseason. They're right there on the Cardinals' heels in the Central. But the Pirates strike out 10 more times. Luis Castillo was dominant in 7 shutout innings there.
Yeah.
And the offense for the, 5th time in this 8-game losing streak scores 1 run or fewer. Prior to that, they had a pretty nice run. They had gone 9 without having a game like this. So, it's about the offense for the most part this year. Yes, the starting pitching has been inconsistent. That's how you get 20 games under 500, despite not having even played 50 games yet. But at the same time, if you had to pick one sore spot and emblematic of tonight, it still remains the lineup.
And I also think if you're being fair to the members of the pitching staff, the members of the bullpen, and the members of the starting lineup in terms of the offense is who you want to hold the feet to the fire the most, because they had the most expectations to at least be halfway decent, certainly off of their recent performances. Brian Reynolds struggling most of the season after his hot campaign of 2019. Josh Bell struggling towards the end of that season and carrying that over again to this year. Revved it up a little bit recently, but it's not been anything of note for the Pirates. Brian Hayes has been that nice performer. Eric Gonzalez kind of hyped up and did a little bit earlier in the season. He's kind of faded a little bit. But most of those contributors, certainly Polanco again, hitting 130-something, struggling most of the year after having his injuries and having the COVID virus himself. You would figure those players, certainly the Reynolds, Bell, and Polanco, you expect more from. We talked about this just ad nauseum on previous postgame shows, that the pitching staff, based on the injuries and the fact that you don't have everybody you thought you were going to have, Chris Archer not there this year, that it's hard to be too mad, because Brubaker, even Joe Musgrove and Trevor Williams. I mean, these guys were not supposed to be top of the rotation guys throughout a regular campaign, and that's where they were forced into this season. The Pirates, no runs, 3 hits, no errors. The Reds, 1 run, 5 hits, and no errors, as again, they are now 1 game under 500. So they are a contender. Any thoughts on the Brubaker start? He does put up a decent showing.
Yeah, not bad. 5 1/3, four strikeouts. So his strikeout numbers remain pretty promising for him. I just think in general, there's a lot at stake for him here. And
Sure.
I referenced this in the previous Pirates post game that I hosted on Sunday after the loss to the Royals.
Yeah.
But the class of 2016 for the Pirates in terms of their pitching staff, their rotation members, Trevor Williams, Jamison Tyone, Chad Kuhl, and Stephen Brault. For the most part, it's fizzled. Now we'll check in on Tyone again in the spring. I'm hopeful for him. If there's one guy who's going to be able to come back and be a contributor, it would be someone with the disposition and the talent, to be clear, of Tyone. But as of right now, there's an opening in the rotation. There are a couple of openings, most likely. I'm not saying that Trevor Williams is going to get DFA'd or released or anything like that, but he's not pitching like you needed him to pitch in order to give you a positive outlook for his future. Stephen Brault's a swing man at best, I think, in the big leagues. Chad Kuhl still a question mark. He's coming back from Tommy John, but typically control is an issue for guys like that. I'm willing to grant at least a reprieve on this season. Still, the fact remains that the rotation spots that are available now are probably going to be available next season too. And you're going to see Chris Archer, I think, let go as well. So there are opportunities here, and this is a real audition for JT Brubaker. So I think on the whole, he's done pretty well. A rough start last time out, 7 earned runs against the White Sox. Difficult lineup to face for sure. But here's a difficult ballpark to pitch in against a team that's motivated to try to win as much as possible, and against a lineup that's pretty darn strong, I would say, in the Reds. And all he does is give up 1 run on a couple of singles. So I think for the most part, I give that a passing grade. I give that pretty close to an A grade, in fact, for young JT.
Yeah. And Trevor Williams, though, the only pushback I have with him is he did pitch well earlier in the season, or at least better than he's been recently. He did have that 7-inning performance. He pitched, I guess I could say he pitched longer into games than the rest of the staff earlier into the season. It didn't result necessarily into victories, but I feel like he's solidified himself as a member of the future of this team, if anyone in terms of the staff has. Just based on good faith and earlier in the year, he certainly puttered it away. But I wouldn't imagine he puttered it away enough to be on the verge of being bounced out of town.
No, I don't think so either, but it's a 6.35 ERA and a 1.6 whip. It's pretty terrible numbers, honestly.
Yeah.
I know that he had a couple of good starts early, but there's no reason that Ben Cherington is going to be loyal to Trevor Williams. That's all I'm saying. If he doesn't get off to a good start next year, I think he'll get an opportunity next year, but
I guess that's what I'm saying.
There could be some open spots. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I do see we have a chatter, and it is our good friend David Grimley back from the Pittsburgh face-off days. I don't know if can you see that there?
Yeah, let me pull it up. I don't see it right now. I didn't have the window open at the moment.
I was
too busy yakking. I'll get it open.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this too. But thoughts on whether next year's MLB draft will be based on this year's results or a version of the NHL Crosby sweepstakes. Obviously, we didn't know earlier in the year that we were going to get through this season. So that was a lot of the time our answer. We now clearly know we're getting through this season. We're going to have a postseason. But I guess thoughts on how this season could impact the draft and Major League Baseball's decision-making process as they now are starting to come down with their decisions on what they're going to be doing. We just saw news this week about the postseason and what they're going to be doing there. It kind of was a head scratcher most of the season on what they were going to be doing, but they actually now do have some resolutions, it appears.
Well, I think that it's not really worth discussing too much. If they did want to do something where they would just wait the lottery and or have a lottery in the first place, which baseball has never done. But if they wanted to offer, say, the bottom 3 teams or even the bottom 5 teams a chance to win the draft lottery and get the first overall pick, I wouldn't have a problem with that because it's a 60-game season and the 5th worst team could have easily been the worst team at the end of 160 or even some teams further up the standings, in fact, could have fallen all the way down. So I think they would have a claim to that way being more fair and more equitable.
Maybe more than the
near the
NHL
bottom.
did. Maybe more than the NHL did, because the NHL got through 90% of their season, and then they did have those 10 or 12 games left where some teams could have sneaked in. But I didn't really love the NHL decision in terms of, say, the Penguins having a chance at the first overall pick by being eliminated when they were secure a playoff position as a top 5 seed prior to the pandemic. But in Major League Baseball, to your point, 60 games is literally half. So yeah,
That's less than half.
Yeah, less than half, actually. Yeah, you're going to 162. Yeah, so way less than half. Yeah, I'm sorry. So way less than half. So significantly, it's late here, but significantly down from the normal season there of 162 games. So they definitely do have. There definitely could be some thoughts. I doubt anyone will complain too much, because you can't legitimately say that this is secure to what it would have been in 162. Certainly, things could have changed. There's been seasons where the MVP struggled through the first 60 games, turned it on in September, and ended up claiming an individual award. We're only going to have the overall 60 games this year.
Well, right. Here's a good opportunity, though, to just jump off that and talk about what the league has decided. We saw the news come down that it'll be a 16-team playoff. We knew that already, but that there will be pods in which these series will be played beyond the first round. The first round best of 3 series will be played at the stadium of the team that's the higher seed, as is typical, but all 3 will be there and no off days in between. So I don't mind that so much. I don't mind the pod idea either. You're going to see some games in San Diego, Los Angeles, Arlington, Houston, with the World Series being at the new ballpark, Globe Life Park in Arlington, Texas, the home of the Rangers. So they got that settled, and it seems like there are some allowances for fans to join up. Not fans, I'm sorry. Well, possibly fans. I guess we'll see on that. But for family members, I would meant to say, to join up and to get inside the bubble like we're seeing in the NHL and the NBA now as they reach their late stages of the postseason. So that all seems right. But what I think caught most of our attention was Rob Manfred saying that the 16-team playoff may be here to stay, or at least an expanded playoff could be here to stay. I don't know about 16 teams, Mike, because I feel that would lead to just a straight up bracket. And I want to see teams that do well in the regular season, that finish near the top of their division or at the top of their divisions, to get a bye or some sort of an advantage there, as opposed to just having everyone start on level footing, which we're seeing this season. Again, 60 games. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. But if they go into the future and it's a 162 or a 154 or a 144 or whatever regular season, and they expand the playoffs, I would like to see there be some buys mixed in there too. So maybe 12 is better. Maybe 14 even could do it, because that's still less than half the league. 16 for me is a little much, because that is more than half the league making the playoffs. And I feel like baseball is supposed to reward the regular season in some way. And unless you can show me a way to have buys and 16 teams, then I would definitely balk at that idea.
Yeah, I'm not down with it either. And as many of these rules during the pandemic season have been a positive, universal DH, different things like that, a lot of those probably are going to be staying. Some like don't like the others. Most of them have been good for the game. This I do feel would be a poor decision, and it would be a knee-jerk decision, which wouldn't surprise me if Rob Manfred makes a knee-jerk decision to try to catch some excitement off of what we see here. It's interesting he's making these comments prior to even starting this 16-team postseason, because I could see maybe feeling the love affair in the midst of it. But even before we get there is a little bit unsettling. I hope it doesn't happen that way. I get that Major League Baseball, in comparison to the other leagues, has spent so much of their history having the least amount of teams contend for the postseason all the time, even going back to, not too long ago, where it was literally just winning a division, getting you into the championship series, and then that being your only series that you would need to then get on to win a pennant and go to the World Series. And not too long ago prior to that, that just simply winning a league immediately gets you into the World Series. All those rings for Yogi Berra were just the exact same amount of playoff appearances that he's had, because the second the season was over, he was immediately into the World Series to win his 10 championships. So Yes, I get Major League Baseball's issue in terms of not having enough teams in the past. I'm glad that I do think the interleague play makes sense that some didn't like. I do think wild card makes sense. I don't even mind the wild card round, but expanding it any further, and 16 would just be ludicrous permanently. But even going to 12 or going too much further, it gets into watering down the overall result. Number one. Certainly 16 would water things down. It could compromise in the middle, but 16 would definitely water it down. And number two, as you mentioned, you do have to. And this is a thing that I feel like most of these leagues in professional sports are kind of getting away from. You do have to reward the regular season a little bit, or you're going to make it just pointless to even occur. I mean, we've heard Adam Silver make comments about maybe everybody would make the NBA playoffs, or maybe we'd have a tournament with all the non-postseason teams and throw them in, and the winner of that can get in. And you're making it to where, while these results would be interesting and it might be fun to watch, you're making it where it's a small chunk that doesn't make it. It's almost everybody getting there. So the regular season does lose its luster, and it takes away the necessity to even play with integrity through most of that regular season in terms of who you're going to be putting out there any given day. But there has to be a way to reward the regular season. There has to be a way to have a regular season team that played very well in the regular season be rewarded with home field, or, as you mentioned, a bye. The only thing I don't think is going to happen, though, is if you have 16 teams and a bye, they're not going to want to have this go into almost Thanksgiving. I mean, at some point here in a regular season, if you start the postseason in the same calendar month that you normally do without a global pandemic, you can't have it go too much longer. So I don't know how that would work, but I do think you're watering it down by allowing too many teams. And I don't need this done permanently just because it's forced to happen this year.
I do feel for commissioners and the powers that be in these sports, because you want to strike that balance between enfranchising your teams to get better. Because say if it's the old way in baseball, we're not going all the way back to the old way. You were talking about the Yogi Berra years, but say it's 5 teams in each league, or say it's 4 teams in each league, going back to before the wild card games were being played. Say you're 11th out of 15 teams in a given league. What's your motivation to try to get better at the trade deadline? I understand that. Or even in the offseason, you finish 11th or 12th. Do you feel like you can really make that leap to 4th? So I felt like that was too few playoff teams. There is a way to have too few. And but there's also a way to structure your playoffs where a regular season winner or winners get rewarded, while also you allow enough teams in that teams and fans stay engaged or the maximum amount, or the biggest amount of fans stay engaged as long as possible in these seasons. Because we've seen it here in Pittsburgh with some teams where you just don't care in August and September because they're so far out of it. Whereas this year, if the Pirates were even respectable, say just a couple of games under 500, they'd be right there knocking on the door in the final 2 weeks of the regular season. And that's what you want, right? You want the most teams and fans engaged and excited about what's going on. So
and that's
there's that balance there.
Cincinnati. That's the situation with the Reds. They were disappointing earlier in the year. They were a sexy pick. They didn't get it done. They were able to turn it around even in a short season. And I don't think anyone's picking them to win a pennant, but they're keeping you excited at the end of the season. They're a contender. They're going to try to squeak in. And then once you get in, who knows? They're certainly right there. Only 1 game under 500 as we're speaking now. So that could have been the Pirates. It's not the Pirates. It probably wasn't going to be the Pirates off any reasonable prediction. But yeah, I get also wanting to have more teams as quote unquote buyers, so that even if the end of the season they fade, that at least at the end of July, at the trade deadline, at least in a normal year again, at least then they're buyers and they believe, and you start a regular season before the year starts with more teams feeling like they have a chance. I get all of that. But I do want to make another thing clear, because you also brought up having the expanded playoffs and you want to stay away from the bracket. I would rather, if I had to pick between these two evils here, Matt, I don't want to have 16 teams permanently for sure. I really don't want to expand. I do think you had too few playoff teams in the past prior to the wild card round. I do actually think it's kind of perfect now. I could maybe see another wild card round, but that's kind of as far as I would want to go off a compromise. But that evil wouldn't be as bad for me as a full-on bracket format, because while that works wonders for the NCAA tournament in college basketball and everyone loves it, everyone's filling out a bracket even if you don't follow during the season, I also hate what the NHL did for a while. They didn't do it this year, where you just go full on a bracket. It's like a March Madness feel, and then you don't reseed. I do want to have a reseeding at the very minimum if you do a bracket, because again, it's about rewarding the success of the regular season. If you play well in the regular season, you shouldn't just get screwed because of where you are on a bracket. It should be a situation where you should always be playing the quote unquote worst team available, because why? You earned that by playing well in the regular season. And if that team who is quote unquote the worst team available feels like, well, they're not really the worst team and they should be in a fair situation, you know what I would say to them? Play better in the regular season, and then you don't have to be the quote unquote worst team in terms of where the seeding is and have to play a tougher road. That's just the life of an 8 seed. That's the life of an 8 seed in some of these playoffs. I mean, even this year, that you look at the roster of the Portland Trailblazers in basketball, that's not normally an 8 seed roster. And they had to play the Lakers. They lose to LeBron. They might have been able to contend with some other teams, but they were an 8 seed because they didn't play well for the first 8 months of the season. So that's your punishment. I don't know. It's not no one's trying to hurt anyone. It's just that's the way it has to be. You have to have some reasonable reward for the regular season, and the regular season does have to matter in some way. So as much as I don't want to expand, the worst result for me is if you do expand and then you don't do a reseeding if you do a bracket. That would just get really to a level of unfairness that would be comparable to rewarding home field advantage in the World Series off of an all-star game winner, because that was the case for a while, and I thought that was mightily unfair, and some teams that were the better record ended up having to be on the road in some of those World Series.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that that was maybe the least equitable solution, and somehow it ended up being a reality for about 10 years.
That's what I'm saying. That felt like forever. Matt Gajtka here, Mike Asti, the Pirates edition here of Pittsburgh Postgame on PSL. And if you're here, and we know David's here, but we have a few others who are here with us, or if you're watching this later, click on the subscribe button, bottom of the video. It helps us notify you when any of these videos, live or otherwise, go up on the channel from any of our now network of sites, including an expansion just today. So we're always growing here at the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks. The Pirates 1-0 losers to Cincinnati in this one. Matt, what are your thoughts on the Reds? I mean, obviously they're the opponent. This is a Pirates postgame show, but as we mentioned, the Pirates season is already seemingly over besides watching Key Brian Hayes, a 14-34 team. The Reds, though, won under 500. They are a contender. They do have Trevor Bauer and a staff that could actually win some postseason series if you do get yourself into the playoffs. They do have a roster that usually performs better than they did today. Maybe underachieved earlier in the season, but as we stand, they are knocking on the door.
Well, for one, I like the fact that the Reds are rewarding one of the most loyal fan bases in sports. The Cincinnati Reds fans don't get a lot of credit, I think, just because Cincinnati in general gets overlooked as a major league city. It just has the two teams, of course. It has the Reds and the Bengals, but the Reds have a proud history, as we all know. They haven't won the World Series in now 30 years, going back to that 90 team. Really, they haven't been great consistently since the 70s. So the Reds fans have suffered, maybe not as much as Pirates fans, but they have suffered a bit. So I'm happy for that fan base. I know that a lot of Pirates fans don't have much love for the Reds because of some of the rivalries that have built up, some of the beanball wars that have happened, not just last year, not just the past couple of years, but going back to the early Kutch days and when Aroldis Chapman was in town. I don't have to really elaborate too much on that because we all remember it. So on that side of it, I understand some folks saying, forget it, I don't want the Reds to make it. But for me, it's better than the Cardinals making it again. So I'll be pulling for the Red Legs the rest of the way here. Overall, like you said, Trevor Bauer, maybe the best pitcher in baseball, or one of the best starters in baseball right now. Luis Castillo is interesting. They have some pretty, I would say, competitive arms in the bullpen. We saw Archie Bradley, Amir Garrett as well. So there are some reasons to believe if you're a Reds fan there. And I would like to see Joey Votto get one more playoff run here. He's kind of getting toward the end of the line. Not that he's going to retire imminently or anything, but I don't feel like he has gotten enough of the spotlight in the postseason because the Reds have just played maybe one series, possibly two, plus the wild card loss to the Pirates.
Well, he was in
his
the
tenure in Cincy, so he's a true student of the game. He's someone that I have loved to watch for years and years now. So there are enough, for me, interesting storylines there to put them definitely above St. Louis, if not Chicago, as far as teams that I'd like to see make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, Joey Votto, I mean, he hit that game-winning home run to clinch a division title in 2010, which is right after the Griffey and Dunn era came to a close. The Reds managed to squeak in that postseason, and we know the result because that was the Roy Halladay perfect game postseason appearance as well. So Halladay unfortunately didn't get to continue that Philadelphia Phillies pennant streak as they were in 08 and 09 and then did not get in 2010, losing the NLCS to the Giants. But they did beat the Reds, so the Reds didn't get a series. I don't believe Joey Votto really had much experience in the postseason since then. He's not had a postseason series victory to his credit. And he's been a very underrated Red, I could say. He doesn't have the cachet as a legit Hall of Famer like Griffey. He doesn't have any of the success in terms of overall career success that would maybe lead him into being remembered beyond his team's fans, like, say, the 70s Reds or even before. But as far as a good player for a long period of time that has been consistent, been on the same team, and has been puttering away at not near superstardom, but just a quality major leaguer, I wouldn't think it'd be crazy to induct him into the Reds Hall of Fame one day. Maybe not beyond that for sure, but there are worse players and teams halls of fame. So I could certainly see that possibly done for him. But outside of that day, anyone who's not a Reds fan probably doesn't realize how long he's been with Cincinnati and what he's done there. So it would be nice for him to have, one more ride in the sun. One thing I did want to bring up is in our playoff conversation. I don't know if you've been following any with the NBA at all, but they have some strict rules on the friends and family that are allowed to be at the games in terms of how they can act. Where Russell Westbrook actually got in a jawing war with Rajon Rondo's brother who was at a game, and they were yelling back and forth, and the result became that Rajon Rondo's brother got ejected and almost got suspended from coming to other games because, unlike a regular game where that would just be fun, they just jawing back and forth, it wasn't anything beyond that, the NBA administers some strict rules that if you are the rare fan or family member invited, you cannot say anything close to negativity at all. You're supposed to basically just sit there, and that is it. They don't really want any jawing or any normal sportsmanship. Hey, you suck, you're on the opponent. They kind of have tried to get that out of there because of the pandemic for whatever reason in their bubble. Any expectations of anything like that in Major League Baseball? I didn't hear anything like that in terms of rules, but I wonder how they would handle people being there if they are there.
Well, I know that some soccer games here stateside, they have told supporters groups not to chant or sing because, of course, everyone, not to be disgusting, but when you yell or sing or scream, you spit, right? So that goes into the air if you're not wearing a mask, especially, which some are and some aren't. So I would think they would require some sort of a masking protocol there. I understand in the NBA, at least trying to get heckling to be at a minimum because you're in that controlled environment. It's quiet in there and everybody can hear everything. So maybe they just don't want that distraction, or maybe it is about just the projectile, the spittle getting out there too. So
it was a distraction that game. Nobody could get their eyes off of Russell Westbrook for the 10 minutes that he was jawing back and forth with Rajon Rondo's brother. That was surely a distraction on that.
Well, baseball being an outdoor sport, sound tends to disperse when there's not a roof. So I don't think that would be a concern here.
That's true. It just was funny, and this would be the next sport to experience with people at a postseason if they do end up getting there.
Well, do you want to do ups and downs here before we sign off?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, I'll give you an up here, and it's Josh Bell. I realize that it's going to be a disappointing season regardless of how he finishes, but now it's a 10-game hitting streak for him. He got on base twice tonight. That led all Pirates against Castillo, certainly, this evening. He's at the point right now where even the ground outs are struck pretty well. He had one that was over 110 miles per hour as measured by StatCast. against Castillo. So maybe you could say 15 hits over 10 games. That's pretty spread out. It's a lot of one-hit games. But I am seeing better production, as I talked about in the previous Pirates postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. He's starting to drive the ball the opposite way. He doesn't look as totally off timing-wise. And we all know hitting is timing. If you're not timing it right, it doesn't matter how good your swing is in terms of bat path or bat speed. It's going to look ugly. So it's taken him a while. I think the key for Josh going forward here, assuming he remains a Pirate, and I think he will for the next couple of years at least, but the key for him is to figure out some sort of timing mechanism where he can find the bat on the ball and be in the same ballpark, pun not intended there, as the pitch as often as possible. Easy for me to say, but that seems always been a struggle for him, Mike. And he's a tinkerer at the plate. He likes to try different things. I wish he'd be able to find something. I'm sure he wishes he'd be able to find something that would be more consistent, because when he does time it right, no one hits the ball harder on the Pirates. And I would venture to say there are a few in Major League Baseball who hit the ball harder when he's on time with a pitch.
Yeah, that's definitely an up. And I could almost argue too, he hasn't got enough credit for turning it around a little bit in terms of the hit streak that you mentioned, the contact that you mentioned. And also, again, and we've said this, and it almost sounds like we're trying to make excuses, and by no means are we, because we've certainly been made it clear this Pirate team has not been good enough, and none of us play that game. But it is fair to say that 60 games is well below what normally is what Major League players are used to. And there have been many players that struggled through their first 60 and then turned it on towards the end of the season and ended up with very respectable final numbers, if not all-star type seasons, and in fact, MVP type years. And one example for anyone to look up is Chipper Jones in 2000. He was not good the first few months of that season. He turned it on in August and September and won his only MVP. He's a Hall of Famer, of course, but that was not someone who was predicted to win that MVP. That was more of his coming out party after being a great player, but kind of underrated with some other Hall of Famers in that same era. He was able to snag an MVP mostly off of 2 months at the end of the season, which these players don't have that ability now this year because they only have 60 overall games to play. So who knows if Josh Bell could have finished out with the rest of what would have been a final 100, maybe he could have been able to turn this around a little bit, regardless of that would have increased the team. I think another up, though, has to be Ke'Bryan Hayes. And I put this question out there on Twitter, just the fact that in all reality, if you're not hosting post-game shows like you and I are covering this team on an everyday basis on a beat, he probably is the main reason you're watching now, I would imagine, as a fan. And hit today, he has performed. You even see him flash leather out there in the outfield, and we talked about that is a place that he really can have success, a multiple-time Gold Glover in the minors, which is really saying something. So a question mark around how much he'll hit offensively into the future, but he's been consistent enough with the bat, with also what he does with the glove, that he's been fun to watch. And without having him this last month or so, it would have been really boring baseball. So I think that's another up, just the fact that he's still there and kind of entertaining the fans a little bit.
Well, let's mix in a down here, because I have a double down, in fact, when it comes to Gregory Polanco. Now 2 for his last 36 over his past 12 games. It's getting really ugly for Gregory. And according to Ben Cherington, though, and this is the double part of that down, Mike, he's still very young, Gregory Polanco, even though he's definitely not in terms of athlete years. Yeah, he's young in the sense of human years and lifespan. Yeah. He's got a long way to go, hopefully, there.
Sure.
But 29 is either middle of the prime or backside of the prime, and he's just not there on a consistent basis. He's more injured than on the field a lot of years. I suppose at least this year he's been out there more often than not. It's tough to have to pay him $11 million next year. Team options for the following 2 years after that at 12.5 and 13.5. Initially, I thought that 5-year, $35 million price tag would be pretty close to a bargain, because I was bullish on his rise. And of course, 2018 was a big year for him until he got hurt late in the season. Since then, it's looking like he's a complete bust, and it's amazing to watch how his stock has fallen since. Remember, in 2014, it was him and the late Oscar Taveras who were considered the best prospects in baseball. And it's a shame we didn't get to see those two guys go head to head try to settle that on the field. But for right now, in terms of Gregory's trajectory as a major leaguer, it's flatlined, if not plummeted here. So a down for him and a down for Cherington, even though I know what he's doing. He's trying to at least prop up the guy a little bit. But if you're paying attention and you're a talent evaluator in Major League Baseball, I don't care what Ben Cherington says about Polanco. You realize, A, he's not young, and B, he's not looking like a sure bet at all to produce anything in his 30s.
No, he's younger than us, and he's younger as a person. But no, that's almost insulting our intelligence. But I do get it. Ben Cherington's not going to come out there and outright say, well, this guy is getting at the end of the line, and boy, am I disappointed, and he's just been sucking for a year and a half. He's not going to say that. But in all reality, that is the case. And he could have maybe found some diplomatic way to dance around the answer without having to pretty much just lie or insult our intelligence. So someone 29 years old is not a young player for any pro sport, not a young player for Major League Baseball, even Hall of Famers. Very, very rarely does anyone get better after 30. And yes, Barry Bonds, who may or may not have been enhanced a little bit there with his best seasons coming after 35, is a rare example. But aside from him, one of the greatest ever, maybe the greatest ever, and potentially enhanced as well, you're not getting better after 30. You usually dip, and Polanco's not near that level, and he's certainly been dipping. To be 29 years old, and for a Pirate, usually after you're 30, you're barely on the team still if you have any semblance of success. So that's crazy. On up, though, I would say is maybe the bullpen, certainly for at least this game. And I talked about this with Kyle Dawson, a play-by-play man with the Washington Wild Things on a past post-game show, that, of course, the bullpen hasn't been good enough collectively overall. But it's fair to say they haven't got enough credit at times pitching admirably. Certainly maybe better than expectations. Tonight is one of those examples where they fired out there after the fifth inning. You saw 3 strikeouts from Stratton. You saw solid outings there from 3 or 4 pitchers. And they certainly gave the Pirates an opportunity to win this game if they could have mustered up a run or two. The Pirates offense let the bullpen down. In fact, let the overall pitching staff down in this game, not vice versa. So I think, to be fair, because it has been rare this year, that you got to give the bullpen an up in this game. It has not been something that's been a strength for the team this year, but they've been better than people think at times. They're made fun of a lot, but there's been a lot of these games where the bullpen is certainly the final 3 pitchers whenever they come in there have pitched admirably. The team let them down offensively, and the bullpens had to go longer than most teams. I mean, they're coming in there after the 5th inning. Most bullpens on contenders don't appear until the 6th or 7th. So to be fair to this bullpen, this was a solid day. You can't ask for much more, and the team let them down.
Well, sure. Injuries come into play. Kyle Crick's not available. Keone Kella's not available. Those are your 2 best relievers. Yeah. So I've been guilty of it too, Mike. You said people have underestimated them. I'm one of them, honestly, and they're easy to poke fun of because they had so many guys, Del Pozo among them. Remember the erstwhile Pirate Miguel Del Pozo felt like he pitched every game just in mop up. So when you're on the negative end of a blowout score, you're not going to throw your best pitchers out there. So I think sometimes the perception of it can be worse than the reality. And in general, the pitching staff has been ravaged by injuries. It's been a lot worse on the pitching side than it has been in terms of position players. So I agree with you there. And I will give credit to guys like Stratton, who for the most part have held it down. Turley shows some promise there too. So there are several guys that I would say, all right, Sam Howard as well.
Yeah, and that's who was in the pen today.
Yeah, exactly. Neverauskas, I don't mind if I'd never see never again. Thank you very much. But even Richard Rodriguez has taken a step back and a step forward, or back to where he was 2 years ago.
Right.
So there are certainly some positives to emphasize there if you're into that sort of thing here. I'm going to give you another down, and this is broadcast related. I feel like sometimes, especially Greg Brown and Bob Walk, they've been around the ball club a lot, a long time, 30 years now, basically, almost together. They can start to sound like bitter older men when they're doing a game and there's not a lot going on. Like today, when Greg sarcastically talked about the fact that, Garrett Cole was definitely a mediocre pitcher before he left Pittsburgh, and then only after that did he start to pitch well. obviously alluding to the fact that there's been much made about Garrett Cole's transformation after he was traded to the Astros and now pitching for the Yankees. He strikes out a lot more guys, in fact, and has been encouraged to use his breaking pitches and get more swings and misses than he was in Pittsburgh when they were trying to make him into a ground ball guy a lot of times. So I feel like that's not necessary. I don't need you to you talk about insulting my intelligence from the Ben Cherington perspective. This is insulting my intelligence because Garrett Cole definitely is a different pitcher at post-Pirates. He definitely did figure some things out with the help of guys who weren't on the Pirates payroll. So don't give me this crap about, oh, he just wasn't appreciated because he was in Pittsburgh. No, he was a lesser pitcher when he was in Pittsburgh. He didn't get as much swing and miss, and he should have because his stuff is dynamic. And it was dynamic back then, but he was encouraged to pitch to contact more often than not. So that was the Pirates' fault, and don't tell me anything different. So that pissed me off, honestly, listening to that later in the later innings tonight. Just slipping that in, it insults me. It really does.
And I can see that gets to you. Yes, I appreciate that as well. Yeah, that was a little unnecessary and a little ridiculous. I can say, though, that I don't know if he was trying to get to this area, that most of Garrett Cole's time with the Pirates, and this is what Pittsburgh fans do, was a consistent debate on whether or not he was a quote-unquote ace. Certainly after the 2013 season, he did have some quality years. He did have some quality campaigns. And maybe at that time, that conversation was a bit annoying because the Pirates, certainly towards the end, were no longer a contender. And it just seemed like no one could appreciate Garrett Cole because of that continuously debate. But as you said, he has been a completely different pitcher since leaving the Pirates. He has certainly figured things out. He has become an ace since leaving the Pirates. He hasn't had to be an ace, though, because with the Astros, he was pitching behind Justin Verlander, who is a Hall of Famer, and now he's on a Yankee staff. That he is the ace, but there certainly are others on that staff. So he has had less pressure on him now to be the guy and to also still get wins when his team gives up runs, which could not also happen as often with the Pirates. So he's become a better pitcher. He has less pressure. He's able to not have to pitch with as much pressure on him and figure out that he has to do everything. But, if there's ever any issues for Garrett Cole trying to get in any Hall of Fames, maybe he can harken back and be mad at his Pirate days, because he certainly didn't rack up the numbers that he would have if he pitched his entire career like this. If he pitched his whole career like he's been from this year to the last 2 years, he would be a generational pitcher. He had an historic postseason with Houston that I don't think he gets enough credit for. It was not near what he did with Pittsburgh. He was much worse as a Pirate, but that's just the fact. For him to figure it out until late in his career, he now has less pressure on him. But those beginning Pirate years, they weren't the same. Garrett Cole there. Did we do the 3 up, 3 down? I think we need another up. Do you have another up?
Well, I'm going to steal this one from Dave Gormley because he's being a good team player on the chat right now.
Okay.
Speaking of Brian Hayes, they completed a rundown, did the Pirates, without throwing the ball away or having any needless throws and stretching it out too much. You'll recall on the base hit by Shingo Akiyama of the Reds that scored the run. They also got a second runner thrown out at home plate because Brian Hayes really handled that rundown very well. He had command of it, looked the runner back to first, and then pivoted and threw smoothly at home. It wasn't an amazing play by any means, but we've seen the Pirates and other teams mess those up. So it's good to see that beyond the quick first step and some of the flashy talent that Hayes brings, he's also very fundamentally sound, it seems. I know he had that base running mistake in his first game, but I'll forgive. The adrenaline of your debut can sometimes take over. I think you're looking at a really good defender in a lot of ways. And I think also that defense, to use the cliche, doesn't often go into a slump, or at least not as often as offense does. So I'm an appreciator of defense. I've always loved it, going back to the days of the web gems on Baseball Tonight and all that. So I'm a huge supporter of guys adding value via the glove. And I'm glad that I think now we appreciate it better because of StatCast, for one, because of some of this catch probability stuff that's out there. So that's been fun to dig into that more. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those dazzling plays and dazzling StatCast numbers from a guy like Hayes in the near future.
Yeah, and another thing for Dave there, I do see his thoughts with the 10 playoff teams, the wild card game. He almost provided a compromise. I can be okay with Dave's proposal there in comparison, certainly in comparison to what Rob Manfred's proposing permanently and what we have currently now if we put this into a non-pandemic year. But Yeah. I mean, but it's fun talking to you, man. It's fun doing these shows. Even though this has not been a season that Pirate fans would have liked, or even in a year they weren't expecting much. This has certainly been below expectations, but it is nice to see Ke'Bryan Hayes. I think it at least quiets that debate of some that did not want him to come up at all. I get the Super 2. I get all of that, but it's provided something to watch at the end of this season. It's very rare Pirates actually get into that issue anyway. Very unlikely that he's going to be the guy, though. You question where the other Andrew McCutchen type player is going to come from whenever this team does win. But either way,
it's a great question. You don't see it in the system. They have plenty of. There was an article by Rob Biertempfel of The Athletic today about how does the Pirates system match up compared to when Neil Huntington first took over. And yes, Neil Huntington had Andrew McCutchen in the system, a leftover of Dave Littlefield. He had Neil Walker, but that's about it. The rest of it was extremely barren. There was really nobody after that. That's why he had to make the Bay trade and had to make the Xavier Nady deal as well, turning the clock way back to 2008. So right now, Ben Cherington arguably has less in the major league system, or the major league roster, I should say, to make deals from. Alan Saunders and I were talking about this last week. Who do you even trade to get value right now on the Pirates? I don't know if you can, sure. But at the very least, they have enough guys on the farm they can call up and can be reasonably expected to contribute at the major league level. That wasn't the case back when Neil Huntington took over. So there is more depth in the minor league system, a lot more depth, but there aren't the stars as well. So there's a bit of a catch-22 in that spot. I'm not saying you can't do both, but perhaps you could argue that the Huntington regime focused more on depth than anything else, which is good. It's admirable. But all you're going to get at that point is not spare parts, but guys who have average upside. And where the Pirates are right now, I don't know how they get a star, right? So that's why perhaps this upcoming draft is so important. And that's why this 8-game losing streak, to put a tidy bow on things here tonight, is pretty advantageous for their long-term prospects.
Yeah, because that's been a theme for really the three of us, you and I and Alan, on pretty much any of these shows that we're on together or separate, that this Pirate team is better served to not win. The not winning is better. Results like this actually are better for the future. And the Pirates, when you mention who do they have the trade to get that piece, well, any of those options that existed in a conversation 3 months ago, those players have ruined those options because these players have done nothing but decrease their value. The Pirates, and we talked about this a while ago, as horrible as this is to say, the franchise might have been better off not playing at all this year. They would have at least kept the values to where they were before. Now they're lower. The team actually achieved less than maybe they expected, and those individual players were worse than they expected. Certainly Josh Bell is that guy, that he probably was the piece to bring somebody if he was not going to be part of the future. And I don't know what he would bring now. And you probably need another full season of him playing where he was a year and a half ago to bring that type of piece back, even if you do. But Matt, if you want to get us out of here, because that was another one of these Pirate post-game shows, another loss for the Pirates as they're well below 500, but the Reds are now only 1 game back. So watch some Cincinnati baseball, folks. That's going to be entertaining stuff. It's a team to root for. I might get on the Reds bandwagon now. Trevor Bauer on Twitter. He's an interesting follow on Twitter. I'll say that. He's also focused over there on social media.
Oh, yeah. Love him on the mound, hate him on social media.
Yeah, he is trying to really work his brand with everything Major League Baseball is doing. But he's actually doing well, because if you notice, I don't think half of those people who were following him knew who he was prior to the pandemic, unfortunately.
It's true. He does bring a spark to baseball that it's certainly missing. And hey, we can say this for the Reds. They've let Tom Brenneman sit it out. So, hey.
That's true. He did that to himself, but yeah.
He did, but they could have. I liked how they handled that situation. So there's a bonus up for you. They just suspended him. So, and hopefully someone else gets a permanent opportunity there on the play-by-play. Well, on that positive note regarding the Reds, not so positive regarding the Pirates, we'll wrap it up here for Pittsburgh postgame. Looking at Friday night after the doubleheader against the Cardinals, that rare doubleheader where the Pirates will be the road team at home in Game 2 at PNC Park because of the postponement from earlier in the year due to COVID and the Cardinals trying to frantically make up some games. But we hope to talk to you at some point over the weekend during the Cardinals series. Just 3 series left, 2 of them at home. Cardinals this weekend, Cubs early next week, and then at Cleveland to finish up. So probably just 3 Pirates Pittsburgh postgame shows remaining. For Mike Asti and for all of you who watch, thank you so much. This is Matt Gajtka saying good night, and we'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Sports Live.